Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Voice of the Customer podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on digital transformation. Stay with us now to learn how agile businesses are fending off disruption in favor of innovation. Our next case study highlights how powerful and diverse financial information is delivered to the ubiquitous Excel spreadsheet edge. We'll explore how HTI Labs in London provides the means and governance with Schematic to bring critical data to the interface that users want. By leveraging the best of instant cloud-delivered information with spreadsheets, Schematic democratizes end-user empowerment while providing powerful new ways to harness and access complex information. Here to describe how complex cloud-to-core edge processes and benefits can be managed and exploited, we're joined by Darren Harris, the CEO and co-founder of HTI Labs in London. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're also here with Jonathan Glass, CTO and co-founder of HTI Labs. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, thank you.
All right, let's put a little bit of context on this first. What were some of the major trends that you were seeing in the financial sector that led you to create HTI Labs, and what are the problems that you're seeking to solve?
Sure. So in finance, obviously spreadsheets are widespread and have been used for a number of varied problems. And there was a real issue, I suppose, a control issue that started a number of years ago where they got out of control. People were using them everywhere, causing lots of operational risk processes, and really they wanted to kind of get the kind of hands around it and add a load of governance. And what kind of happened, there were loads of we need to eradicate Excel type issues, and led to kind of the creation of centralized teams that kind of locked down really rigid processes and effectively took away a lot of the innovation and discovery processes that traders are using to spot opportunities and explore data. And we really, through this process of trying to help with governance, really understood that the tools to explore the ability to put the data in the hands of people but find the right balance with governance was a real gap that kind of we could fill with our experience. So taking the best of regulatory scrutiny around what these processes need and some innovation that we put into kind of Schematic, we see an opportunity to take Excel to another level but not sacrifice the control that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Thank you, Darren. Jonathan, anything to add to the trends that have driven you, or maybe there's technology trends that allowed you to be able to do this, whereas it may not have been feasible economically or technically before?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of really great back-end technologies that are available now, and the ability to either internally or externally scale compute resources. What you see is essentially the desktop remains quite similar. Excel has remained quite the same, but the kind of upstream capabilities have really grown. So there's a challenge there. The data that people feel like they should have access to is getting bigger, and it's getting more complex and less structured. And so Excel, as this kind of great front end for really getting to grips with data, is becoming a bit of a bottleneck in terms of actually keeping up with the kind of data that's out there that people want to get hold of.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to keep Excel. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, but we're going to do something a little bit different and interesting. What is it that we're now putting into Excel, and how is that different from what was available in the past?
Sure. So Schematic extends Excel and allows it to access unstructured data, and also reduces the complexity and technical limitations that Excel has as an out-of-the-box product. So we have the notion of a data link that's effectively in a single cell that allows you to reference data that's held externally from a back end. So whereas the mode of operation used to be that people would ingest data from another system directly into Excel and effectively divorce it from the source, we can leave that data where it is. So effectively, very much with the paradigm of you take the question to the data, don't pull the data to the question. And that means that we can leverage the power of the big data platforms and how they process and an analytic database in the back end, where you can effectively use Excel as the front screen, ask questions from Excel, but you push that query to the back end. And that's very different in terms of the model that most people are used to working with Excel.
And and that's a two-way street, whereas perhaps in the past an XML stream might have been able to bring in data on a live or recurring basis. This is a two-way street. It's a bit different, and you're also looking at the quality and the compliance and regulatory concerns over that data.
Absolutely, yeah. You're able to. Well, one, an end user is able to break down or decompose any kind of workflow or process with data and debug it the same way they can in a kind of spreadsheet. And the transparency that we add on top of Excel's usage with Schematic allows us to monitor what everybody's doing, the function they're using, so you can give them agility but still maintain the governance, the control. So you see in organizations, lots of teams have become disengaged. IT have, kind of tried to create some central core platform that's quite restricted, and it's not really servicing the users, and they've just, gone disengaged, and they've created what Gartner referred to as the shadow BI team, databases under the desk and stuff like that. By bringing in Schematic, we add that transparency back, and we allow IT and the users to kind of have an informed discussion, a very analytic-led conversation around what they're using, how they're using it, where the bottlenecks are, and work out where the best value is. So it's all about, agility and control. You just can't give these self-service tools around to an organization and not have the transparency for any oversight or governance.
So we've, in a sense, solved this core or cloud to edge need. We've managed it in terms of compliance and security. Now we can start to think about how creative we can get with what's on that back end that we deliver.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about what you go after, what your users want to perhaps experiment with, and then how you enable that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in essence we try and be as agnostic to that as we can, because it's the creativity of the end user that's the thing that really drives value. We have a variety of different data sources, so talking about traditional relational databases, kind of object stores, OLAP cubes, APIs, web queries, flat files, and people want to bring that stuff together. They want somewhere that they can pull this stuff in from different sources, and they can create something that's kind of unique. This sort of concept of a mashup, of actually putting data together that hasn't been put together before. That's where the sparks start to fly, and where the value really comes from.
And with Schematic, you're enabling that aggregation, cleansing, ability to combine, as well as delivering it. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that discovery process, and it may be very early on in a kind of a long chain. This thing may progress to be something more, classic operational structured BI, but allowing end users the ability to cleanse, explore data, and then hand over an artifact that someone in the core team can work with or use as an asset. Makes for a far, the iteration curves are so much tighter, the cost of doing that is so much less, and users are able to innovate and basically put together the scenario of the business case for why this is a good idea. And the only thing I would add to the sources that John's kind of just mentioned is with Haven on Demand, the unstructured analytics, giving users the ability to access and leverage all of the idle capabilities, without the complexity, is a really powerful, in our view, transformational thing for businesses. They have such a set of unstructured data available in voice, text, and in doing that, when you allow business users access to that data, the things they come up with, their ideas, are just quite amazing, to be honest. Technologists always try and put themselves in the minds of the users, and we've all historically done a bad job of making the data more accessible for them. When you allow them the ability to analyze PDFs, put out structure, to share that, to analyze sentiment, to pull concepts and entities, or even enrich that core proposition, you're really starting to create innovation. You've raised the awareness of all of these analytics that exist in the world today in the back ends, shown end users what they can do, and then put their brains to work, really discovering and inventing.
Now, many of these financial organizations are well established, many of them for hundreds of years perhaps. All are thinking about digital transformation, the journey, and are looking to empower and become more data-driven and empower more people to take advantage of that. So it seems to me you're almost an agent of digital transformation, even in a very a technical and sophisticated sector like finance.
Yeah, I think again, there's a lot of stereotypes in terms of who the business analysts are and who the people are that come up with ideas and invention. And I think the true power of democratization is making data more accessible, lowering the technical barrier, and allow people to explore and innovate. Things always come from where you don't expect them the most.
Imagine that Microsoft is pleased with this because there are, some people who are a bit down on Excel. They think that it's manual and that it's by rote and that it's not the way to go. So you're, in a sense, helping Excel get a new lease on life?
Yeah, I think that's probably, I don't think we're the whole story in that space. But I love Excel. I've used it for years and years at work. I've seen the power of what it can do, what it can deliver, and I think I have a bit of an understanding of why that is. And I think it's the kind of live nature of it. It's the fact that people can look at data in a spreadsheet, they can see where it's come from, they can see where it's going, they can trust it, they can kind of believe in it. So that's why what we're trying to do is create these live connections to these upstream data sources. So those manual steps, the download, copy, paste, move around the sheet, which is where errors creep in, is where the kind of bloat, the slowness, the unreliability can happen. By changing that into a live connection to the data source, it becomes instant and it goes back to being trustable, reliable, actionable.
I think there's something in the DNA as well of how people interact with data in Excel, where you can lay out effectively the algorithm or the process of understanding a calculation or a data flow. And I think that's why you see a lot of even systems that are more web-based or web-centric replicate an Excel-type experience that users start to use and start to think, wow, it's just like Excel, until it isn't. And they hit a barrier, they hit a wall, and then they hit the export button, they put it back, and they kind of create their own way and work with it. So there's something quite in the DNA of Excel and the way people lay things out. They can discover it's almost like a programming environment for non-programmers. Some people describe it as a functional language, very much like Haskell, lazy evaluated. And the functions they write are effectively them kind of working and navigating through the data.
No need to worry that if you build it, will they come? They're already there.
Absolutely.
Right. Tell us a bit about HTI Labs. Let's get off the data discussion for just a bit. Tell us a little bit about your background and how your company came about and where you are on your evolution.
Sure. So HTI Labs founded in 2012. The core backbone of the team actually all worked for the same tier 1 investment bank. And we were building risk and trading systems for front office teams. We were really at the cutting edge of all the big data technologies that were being used, in time real distributed graphs and cubes and everything. And as a core team, it was about taking that expertise and bringing it to other industries. Using Monte Carlo farms in risk calculations, the ability to explore data at speed, real-time risk, were things as data was becoming more centric to other organizations, was kind of key. That was the opportunity. So we are focusing predominantly at the moment still in energy trading. Our software is being used across a number of other sectors, and our largest client has Schematic installed on 120 desktops, which is great. That's a real good validation of kind of what we're doing. And we're also a member of the London Stock Exchange Elite Programme, so based in London for fast growth tech companies. So, yeah.
Jonathan, your background?
So Darren and I met when we were working for the same company. I started out as a quant, doing effectively the modelling, the kind of maths behind pricing. But I found that my interest lay more in the engineering. Rather than doing it once, is can I do it a million times? Can I do these things reliably and scale them? Because I started in that front office environment, it was very spreadsheet dominated. It was very VBA dominated. There's good and bad in that. And a lot of those lessons, when Darren and I met up, we kind of crossed the divide together, from the kind of top-down big IT systems and the bottom-up end-user desk-developed spreadsheets and so on. We've sort of found a middle ground together, which we feel is quite a powerful combination.
Great. Okay, back to where this leads. We're seeing more and more companies using data services like Haven on Demand and starting to employ machine learning and AI and bots to augment what the humans do so well. Is there an opportunity for that to play here, or maybe it already is? The question basically is how does AI come to bear on what you can deliver in terms of that higher quality product out to those Excel edges?
Yeah. I think what you see is out of the box you kind of have a base unit. The algorithms are kind of built, but the key to kind of making them so much more improved is the feedback loop between your domain users, your business users, and how they kind of can enrich and train effectively these algorithms. So we kind of see a future where the self-service BI tools that they use to interact with data and explore will almost become the sort of mechanism by people will see the results from the algorithms and give feedback to send back to the underlying algorithm.
And Jonathan, where do you see the use of bots, particularly perhaps with an API model like Haven on Demand?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of a bot is kind of replicating an insight or a process that somebody might already be doing manually. So I think that when people create these kind of data flows and analyses that they maybe run once or that are quite time consuming to run, the real exciting possibility there is that you make these things kind of run 24/7. So you start receiving notifications. Rather than having to kind of pull from the data source, you start receiving notifications from your army of bots that you've created. You look at those and you decide, is that a good insight? Is that a bad insight? You can then start to kind of train it and refine it. And the training and refining is that loop that potentially goes back to sort of IT. Goes back through a development loop, and it's closing that loop and tightening that loop that I think is the thing that really adds value to those kind of opportunities.
Well, perhaps we should unpack Schematic a bit to understand how one might go back and do that within the context of your tool. Are there several components of the tool, one of which might lend itself to going back and automating on that more bot level?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can imagine a spreadsheet as being, it has some inputs, it has some outputs. And one of the components within the schematic architecture is effectively the ability to take a spreadsheet, to take the logic and the process that's embedded in that spreadsheet, and turn it into an executable module of code, which you can host on your server, you can schedule, you can run, as often as you like, you can trigger it based on events. So it's a way of kind of emitting code from a spreadsheet. So you take someone's insight, you take business, without a business analysis loop and a development loop, you take the exact thing that the user, the analyst has programmed effectively, and you make that something that you can run, you can commoditize, you can scale, and that's quite an important way in which we kind of reduce that development loop. We create that cycle that's kind of tight and rapid.
Darren, would you like to explain the other components that make up a schematic?
Yes, so there are 4 components to the schematic architecture. There's the workbench that extends Excel and allows it the ability to handle unstructured data and access these analytics. We have the asset manager, which is really all about governance. So you can think of it like source control for Excel, but with a lot more around metadata control, transparency, analytics on what people are using and how they're using it. There is a server component that allows users to offload and scale out analytics horizontally if they do that, and build repeatable or overnight processes. The last part is the portal. So this is really about allowing end users to instantly share their insights with other people. So picking up from John's point about the compiled executable that is defined in Schematic, that could be offloaded to a server and exposed as another report, another API that could be viewed on the mobile, or even a data set or a function. So very much it's all about empowering the end user to connect, create, govern, share instantly, and then allow consumption from anybody on any device.
So I imagine, given the sensitive nature of the financial markets and activities, that you have some boundaries that you can't cross when it comes to examining what's going on in between the core and the edge. But there might be some metadata and interesting patterns that you could delve into and explore that then might give you an opportunity to see a marketplace for data services. So tell me about perhaps how you as an organization can look at what's going on with the Schematic and your back end, what the democratization and the users are then exercising that democracy with, if you will, and whether that creates another market for data services when you see what the demand entails.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the case that people have, they have internal data sets that they curate, that they look after, that they, people are very precious about them because they're hugely valuable. And one of the things that we strive to kind of help people to do is to share those things. So, you imagine across a trading floor, you might effectively have a dozen or more different IT infrastructures, if you like. If you think of what's existing on the desk as being a kind of miniature infrastructure that's been created, so making it easier for people to share these things, to create these master data sets that they gain value from, and to see that they gain mutual value from that. Rather than feeling kind of closed in and I don't want to share this with my neighbour. Saying, well, if we work together, and if we have the tools that enable us to collaborate effectively, then we can all get more done and we can all add more value.
Yeah, it seems interesting to me that the more we look at the use of data, the more it opens up new markets and innovation capabilities that we hadn't even considered before. And I expect myself as an analyst to see more of a marketplace of data services. You, to me, strike me as an accelerant to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's kind of happening is as the analytics are kind of coming online and exposed via API, the underlying store that's kind of used is becoming a bit irrelevant, actually, because you kind of look at what the analytic can do for you, and that's how you consume the output, and you just literally can connect sources that exist. You can connect from Twitter, you can connect from Facebook, you can connect PDFs. Whether it's NoSQL, structured, columnar, row store, it doesn't really matter. You kind of just see that the complexity, the fact that you can just create an API key and access this and then consumers start to work with it is really powerful. I mean, there was the recent example in the UK of a report into the Iraq War. It was 2.2 million words. It took 7 years to write, and that was released online. I mean, it was available in access, but there's no way any normal person could consume or analyze that. And that's 3 times the complete works of Shakespeare generated. Using these APIs, you can start to pull that apart. You can pull out mentions, you can pull out countries, locations, and really start to get into the data and provide anybody, with Excel at home in our case, or any other tool, the ability to analyze and get in there and share those insights. And we're very used to, I think, in media where we get that just the headline, and that spin kind of comes into play and people turn things on their head, and you never really get to delve into the underlying detail. And I think what's kind of really interesting is when democratization and sharing of insights and collaboration comes, we can all be informed, we can all really dig deep, and all these people that work, that are great analysts, and people at home that are there, can start to collaborate and delve and find things and find new discoveries and share that insight.
Right, so a little light bulb just went off in my head, whereas we would go to a headline in a news story, we might have a hyperlink to a source. I could get a headline in a news story, open up my Excel spreadsheet, get to the actual data source behind the entire story, and then probe and plumb and analyze that any which way I wanted to.
And I think, the more savvy consumer now, the analyst, is starting to demand that transparency. We've seen, certainly in the UK, words and elections and quotes and even financial stats where people just don't believe the kind of headlines. So creating that kind of transparency in process, that governance, can only be really a good thing.
Well, great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been exploring how powerful and diverse financial information is delivered to the ubiquitous Excel spreadsheet edge. And we've learned how HTI Labs in London provides the means and governance with their Schematic tool to bring critical data to the interface that users want most. So please join me in thanking our guests. We've been here with Darren Harris, the CEO and co-founder of HTI Labs. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
And also we've been here with Jonathan Glass, the CTO and co-founder of HTI Labs. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks very much.
And a big thank you to our audience as well for joining us for this Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Voice of the Customer digital transformation discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of HPE-sponsored interviews. Thanks again for listening, and please do come back next time.